Alright, so on October 12th of this year, up-and-coming rising star in the RuneScape content creation space, IronAraxxor, issued his first community PvM challenge with a prize pool of nearly 3 billion GP, with the winner going to walk away with 80% of the total pot. Welcome to my video where I'm going to share with you my approach to competing in this competition. For those of you who did not watch IronAraxxor's original challenge announcement video, allow me to summarize the challenge. The winner would be the person who could defeat the most unique bosses as possible within 1 hour. Only one inventory would be allowed, and the use of banks, boss portals, and the max guild was prohibited. So the skill of the challenge would come down to who could theory craft the most efficient route and inventory while also having respectably fast boss kills. That's a cool challenge, I thought. I'm a solid PvMer, and I have a good amount of general game knowledge that might allow me to come up with a faster route with more bosses than a lot of the competitors, so I'll definitely throw my hat in the ring. I spent about an hour while AFKing divination on my Iron Man coming up with what I thought was going to be the most efficient route. I was considering things like what bosses were nearby to each other, what bosses were close to teleport points that I could carry in my inventory, and what kind of gear am I going to need that's going to allow me to get fast kills without relying on excessive switchscape, and where can I get adrenaline for some of the harder fights. I jotted down a few bosses that fit my requirements. I had most of the bosses from the God Wars trilogy, as they each had 4 or more bosses all near to each other, and several of them even had hard mode variants, which would count for an extra point. There are also a handful of low-level bosses like Chaos Elemental and Queen Black Dragon that would be quick to get to and also quick to kill, and I would only need about a minute or so to get there and kill the boss, so these were easy additions to my list. I was pretty sure that a lot of the competitors were going to have similar ideas to me in this regard, so my route was really going to have to be propelled by getting fast kills at bosses that a lot of players probably would spend too much time at for them to add to their routes. Coming up with a route for bosses that met this criteria would be a little bit more tricky, but the first thing that came to my mind was elite dungeons. I have a fair bit of experience with elite dungeons, particularly in groups where I actually theory crafted the route and rotations for the trio full clear world records with 2 of my former friends. So I was pretty sure that I could come up with some ideas that would allow me to get a respectable solo clear and add 3 more bosses to my score. Now I didn't quite yet have a finalized route in mind, but once I had a baseline idea of what bosses I would like to kill, I could then start coming up with the idea for a single inventory full of teleports and useful items that would allow me to get everywhere I needed without banking. Naturally, with Necromancy being the most broken style in the game currently, not only in terms of pure damage output, but also in terms of HP sustain, this was a no-brainer to use as my main combat style. So to start my inventory, I equipped my best Necromancy gear and brought all the 4 necrotic runes as well as ectoplasm. PvMing without overloads is actually illegal, so I bring 1 6-dose overload salve with me. It's important that this is a salve because anti-poison will be necessary for several of the bosses that I plan to tackle. I also always bring 6,969 vulnerability bombs with me, so that'll take up 1 more slot. To sustain my prayer through the challenge, I'm using a combination of a blessed flask in my inventory, as well as 2 penance powders before starting my hour. In addition to the penance powders, I'm also using Quorum incense sticks and Lantadime incense sticks. Quorum incense sticks are going to increase the amount of poison damage that I'm able to do, and the Lantadime incense sticks are going to increase the timer of my potion. So you notice that my overload is actually at 8 minutes for every dose. This allows me to only have to take 1 overload instead of 2, saving me an inventory slot. And my strategy of using 1 dose of overload before I even start my run technically allows me to get 7 doses of overload, allowing me to have 56 minutes of overload throughout my hour. A lot of the bosses I'll be taking on are susceptible to poison, so I opt to sacrifice my Raziel gloves for Cinderbane gloves, and a 6-dose weapon poison +++. I'm bringing Dominion Mines and 2 adrenaline renewals so I can give myself good chances at doing the best damage at some of the longer bosses. And I'm also bringing an Excalibur for some healing. So that's all my PvME related items, so to speak. Next are going to be all the teleport related items. I'm opting not to bring any food at all, and I'm going to be relying solely on my Soul Split, Ghost Conjure, Excalibur, and Blood Reaver to sustain my hit points. So instead of the food, I'm filling my inventory with as many boss teleports as I could come up with. I have a Sophanum Slayer dungeon tablet, as well as a key to the crossing to be able to kill Magister. I have Barrows totems and a Draken medallion, so that I can access both the normal Barrows Brothers as well as Rise of the Six if I have extra time. I have a Pontifex Signet Ring to put me in the middle of the God Wars 3 dungeon arena, giving me quick access to all those bosses. I have 5 God Wars teleport tablets to quickly access all 5 of the God Wars Dungeon 1 bosses and their hard mode variants. I bring 5 because I found it substantially quicker to teleport back to the central room and then make my way towards each faction from the center, rather than backtracking after killing a boss. The same logic applies to my 5 God Wars 2 teleport tablets. Underneath that, I have a teleport to the Dagannoth Kings, I have a Slayer Cake to teleport to Laniakea, which will put me very close to Raksha. I have Dragon Trinkets, which will provide instant teleports to both Queen Black Dragon as well as King Black Dragon. This is great because using this, I won't have to wait 10 seconds to drop combat and then be able to use a lodestone. I have a portable Wilderness Obelisk, which will put me close to Chaos Elemental, Elite Dungeon 2, and Corporeal Beast. Lastly, I have a Decimation and Ascension Keystone. The Decimation is an ammo-less bow, which is going to be required to be able to kill the Legions, Dagannoth Prime, and Fentraken, the Dinosaur Mom. So, back to perfecting my route. Because the timer for this challenge only starts whenever you turn on your aura, I could also lower down the HP of a slower Elite Dungeon boss down to near death, then turn on my aura, and finish the boss for 1 instant point before moving on to quicker bosses. I originally experimented with starting my aura at the end of Blackstone Dragon and then moving on to a full completion of ED3, the Shadow Reef. But while my time for completing those 4 bosses at 12 minutes was fairly respectable, I ultimately decided that I could find more bosses to kill in the same amount of time if I modified my route. So in the end, I decided to start my aura at the end of Masuda in the first Elite Dungeon, because I would be able to easily and quickly follow that up with a 1-cycle Seiryu kill. Making use of Soul Split and Dominion Mines would make this near trivial, and while in this attempt I didn't actually get the true 1 cycle, I did still end up with a respectable sub 145 kill. I'm hopeful that those extra 15 seconds wasted won't come back to haunt me. I then make my way up to the ED chest and use it to teleport back to the entrance. I leave ED1 and use the teleport feature on the ED chest to make my way over to Zamorak. I enter as quick as I can and I start up a 0% encounter. I'm not especially experienced with Zamorak, and my final kill time ends up being a 325. I opt not to collect my loot to save just a few seconds and head directly to the Magister. While running through the dungeon, I reconjure all my spirits and life transfer to extend their duration. I split soul before the fight, and I end up getting myself a Magister PR of 15.6 seconds. Without worrying about the loot, I break the first of my 5 God Wars teleport tablets. There's a mechanic in this snowy area where if you allow yourself to be hit by the frost, your stats will be lowered and your adrenaline will be set to 0. Obviously that's not ideal, so I try to avoid that by bladed diving and surging to the rope as quickly as I can. From there, I make my way over to Zilyana, using Threads of Fate and Soul Sap to instantly get myself 5 souls before the fight. A common theme in my strategy for this overall run is bosses like this where there is an uninstance encounter. I'm going to opt to use that whenever possible, as this is going to save me 11.4 seconds for every single boss instance. So I enter the encounter, invoke death, volley of souls, and have a fairly quick fight. I quickly right-click the altar and then leave before starting up a hard mode instance. Notice now how I just mentioned that the instance doesn't have a boss up right away, but it instead takes that 11.4 seconds to spawn. So I use that time to summon my conjures and invoke death. Hard mode Zilyana has 2 phases of 50,000 HP, and the second must be finished by using a damaging ultimate ability. Invoke Death seems to skip the 50k HP of the second phase more often than not, so that's a nice little time save before I use Death Skulls to finish her off. I break another God Wars tablet, and it's on to repeat this tactic for the remaining 3 bosses. I make sure that each uninstance boss has full HP so that I'm the only player to damage them. Enter the encounter for the normal mode kill, and then I try to do the hard modes as quickly as I can after that. After finishing the 4 main bosses, I don't want to tackle Nex yet, because I'm actually scared of the ice prison without any food, so I'll have to come back for her shortly when I feel a little more brave. For now, I'm going to go to a quick easy boss in Dagannoth Prime, so I quit my decimation and once again enter the uninstance encounter and dispatch the once fearsome king. After killing him, I leave the instance so that the other 2 kings are not attacking me and closing me out of my interfaces, and now I can use my dragon trinkets to teleport me to Queen Black Dragon. After killing QBD, this is the first boss that I actually care about the loot for 2 reasons. 1, it's going to give me a chance to drop out of combat relatively losslessly so that I can then use a lodestone. And 2, Queen Black Dragon has a very good chance of dropping Rocktails and or Ceradomin Brews. I get lucky and get a couple of Ceradomin Brews, which will be a nice insurance policy for some of the upcoming tougher bosses. Since I'm now out of combat and can now use the lodestones, I make my way up above ground to Port Sarum, where I'm going to charter a ship to Port Phasmatis. This was the quickest way that I could think of to getting to Araxxor without bringing an ectophile. Araxxor is also going to be another boss that is going to have a good chance at either giving me some brews or rocktails that I can use as further peace of mind down the line. I'm actually in luck today, because when I chose to do my attempt at this challenge, Araxxor's first path was open. This is the fastest path by a fair margin if you can pull off a P2 skip. With Necromancy, that hopefully shouldn't be a problem, and with the help of Invoke Death and Split Soul, I'm able to finish off this phase of Araxxor in about 9 seconds. I finish off the boss playing a little bit slow and safe as I'm anticipating a mirror back spawn that never actually comes. I am rewarded though with some rocktails for loot. Now, with all these munchies in my inventory, I'm feeling pretty brave, so I make my way back to God Wars 1 and over to the ancient prison to defeat Nex. My only experience prior to this with Necromancy Nex was doing the Power Armor Challenge on day 2 of release, where I had nearly a 6-minute disaster kill. Today, my experience was much nicer, and might have even been more fun than Ranged Nex, where I comfortably got a 146. I linger just a little bit to see if I can get Brews as a drop, but this ends up being a small time loss, as one of the Reavers is attacking me and keeping me in combat. Not wanting to break the challenge rules and teleport to the PvM hub out of habit, I end up going to the Manor Farm instead. I use the Lodestone and make my way over to the Citadel, where I can face both Hermod and Raziel. I try to end Hermod with high adrenaline so that I can hopefully have a smooth Raziel fight. Without a lot of food, I thought that this fight was going to be pretty scary, but I play fairly safe and use a few defensives, and even opt not to use Split Soul until the final phase, which results in a 127 kill time. Now, safe from the clutches of the first Necromancer, I switch my spellbook and head over to Yanil. There's no boss next to Yanil. Well, okay, I hear your confusion. Part of my setup for this challenge was to have a Totem of Abyss set up in the middle of Anachronia near the Rex Matriarch lair. But you need to have a nature rune to be able to use that teleport, which I don't have in any of my rune pouches. So I head over to the Wizards Guild where I buy myself 5 nature runes. I spellbook swap and can now teleport to Anachronia. My accuracy here ends up being pretty abysmal with a tier 87 bow and necromancy gear equipped, so I turn on my range damage prayer, and this is still a little bit of a slow kill. But it's 1 more point to my total, and well worth the detour in my opinion. A physical Seren Godbow could have been better than a decimation and made a difference with both the increase in tier as well as the huge special attack, but I'm a humble player with humble gear. Now, it's time to painfully watch how long I go without realizing that I've left up my range damage prayer instead of my necromancy prayer. In my VOD review after this hour, I spent a good bit of time here facepalming at this mistake. But anyway, it's time for the God Wars 2 segment of my run. In my route, I'm going to be doing normal mode and hard mode of all the bosses except for Grigorovich, as it's a little bit too long and costly in HP during the gimmicky phase. While running to the bosses, I try to use Threads of Fate and get 5 souls to help me out with doing a little bit more damage during the boss fights. So I do Grigorovich first, followed by Vindicta, followed by hard mode Vindicta. And let me tell you, back in my day when I did Insane Final Boss, hard mode Vindicta for me was like a 6-minute boss fight. So today, getting nearly 1-minute kills with Necromancy feels wild. So Helwyr is where I made the first big mistake of my run, forgetting that I've used Disruption Shield already, and I end up signing to the first big melee attack. In hindsight, I probably should have done normal mode first, but I chose to do hard mode first, as theoretically, I wouldn't have had to lose time by unchecking and rechecking the hard mode box when making my instances. Despite this sign, I managed to recover and had a 39-second hard mode Helwyr. Still faster than back in the day when I did Insane Final Boss. I move on to normal mode, followed by both versions of Twin Furies, which I managed to knock out in under a minute combined. I use my 5th and final God Wars 2 teleport, and start a Telos instance at 0% enrage. My damage felt really low on P1 for some reason, and this is where I finally noticed that I was using the wrong damaging prayer for the entirety of my God Wars 2 segment. I recover a little bit, have a decent P4, and really enjoy the final font, as Deathmark instantly clears it. Now that I've done God Wars 1 and 2, God Wars 3 is going to be the next logical place for me to go. So I use my Pontifex ring and head through the western door to the node on front to face Karapak. I'll only be killing him in normal mode, as I'm pretty clueless to hard mode rotations with Necromancy currently. In one of my earlier runs, I actually got a Scripture of Jas and instantly teleported out, losing me nearly 100 million gold. Painful as this one, the promise of the grand prize and winning the challenge made me feel a lot better. After the kill, I used my Pontifex ring once again and headed north, down to the depths of Seniston, where I had pre-set up my Inferno to start from wave 16. That was going to allow me to skip the slow and tedious waves and directly go on to the 3 bosses back to back to back, Jad, Harakin, and finally Zuck. These 3 bosses took me a little bit under 3 minutes in total. After Zuck, I moved on to both versions of the Arc Glacier, starting with normal mode where I got myself a 4.8 second PR, which I thought was pretty cool. I chose to start with normal mode as I wouldn't have to waste time clicking on the toggles of the 5 mechanics and the hard mode toggle. Then I quickly set up a hard mode kill with 1 click at 0% enrage. Here's another time loss that I don't think I actually could have really prepared for. When I tellied into the wilderness with my portable obelisk to the Chaos Elemental, there was actually someone there killing it, forcing me to hop worlds. So shout out to this guy Darkbeer. I hope you get your pet or whatever you're going for, but man, was that unlucky timing for me. After hopping worlds and dispatching the Chaos Elemental, I let myself loot the stews to once again drop combat and then use the lodestone to Ooglug, where I'm gonna fight one of the 6 legions. While killing the legion, I make sure to use my Ingenuity the Human Sigil and use Deadshot so that I can hopefully do as much damage as possible with my inferior range gear. I drop combat once again and head to Falador to kill both versions of the giant mole. I've had some strange interactions with Deathmark at mole, sometimes gaining me time and sometimes actually costing me time, but in this run it was pretty negligible either way, and I leave content with 2 more points under my belt. I use my dragon trinkets to teleport over to King Black Dragon and use the uninstance encounter to save a little bit of time. I'm trying to save my overload here for as long as possible as I only have 1 dose left and would prefer to use it for bosses with a little bit more than 40k HP. My next choice in boss is the Sanctum Guardian, and in hindsight this may have been a routing error and likely would have been better to do this directly after the Chaos Elemental. Regardless, I have potentially the most clever strategy of this run. As part of my preparation, I did a little bit of Elite Dungeon 1 beforehand until I got a fishy treat as a drop. The fishy treat instantly kills the Sanctum Guardian while still awarding you loot and kill count. That, and I could access it from the ED chest, which saved me an inventory slot over the course of the run and still did not violate the rules about banking. After claiming the easiest point of my life, I used my Slayer Cave to teleport to Laniakia and head over to the Raksha fight. I managed to get a pool skip and enter the final phase at 1 minute and 1 second. Unfortunately, in the final phase, I experienced both brain lag and noodle arms, as I have a phase 4 that was longer than the first 3 phases combined, putting my final Raksha time at 2:18. It's okay though, I have 4 minutes on my aura and only a few more bosses on my list. I drop combat and teleport to the Bandit Camp Lodestone to make my way south. I'm going to be fighting the Calphite Queen and the Calphite King. A lot of people don't know there's a second version of the Calphite Queen who lives in the same layer here. This is the exiled Calphite Queen. I don't really know what the purpose of its existence is. Is it a hard mode Calphite Queen with only 10,000 more HP and 2 more minions? Really? I don't know, but for the purposes of this challenge, it's fantastic that she lives this close to Calphite King. Calphite King has potential to be the biggest troll and time loss of this run, thanks to some really annoying mechanics like green shielding, charging, and digging. I also don't really have much experience with solos in general, but thankfully, Necromancy absolutely goes burr, and I really only have to push just a few buttons. While I do get a couple digs, I manage to still get a 51-second solo under the time pressure, which is a big relief. I use my Draken's Medallion and head over to the Barrows Brothers, where I've prepared a tunnel with all the other brothers and sisters cleared beforehand. This is going to guarantee me my kill count and save me a good amount of time and guesswork finding the right tunnel. I did have Barrows Rods penciled in my route here, but looking at my time on Aura, I make a decision not to risk fumbling a solo kill and make my way over to the Corporeal Beast, using my portable obelisk. I'm really focusing on trying to have clean surges and bladed dive here, because if I waste my time surging into a wall now, I may not get this kill. I make sure that I invoke death and split soul and try hitting any and all buttons, just praying that I can get this kill in time. And with only 2 seconds to spare, I do just that, bringing my total number of unique bosses killed in 1 hour without banking up to 44. So, how did I match up with the competition in the end? Well, I ended up tying for second place, losing the pup by only 1 boss kill. Perhaps if I had a few faster boss kills in my hour and managed to get in that rot solo, I maybe could have tied for first, but it wasn't meant to be this time around. So, once again, I find myself accepting my fate as the second best MacBook trackpad player in the game. Congrats to Pup. Once again, he's just too good at this game, and I'm going to be interested to glance at his route and see what kind of approach he took to this challenge. This isn't a total defeat though. I am still going to walk away with 112 million coins as a participation prize, which is money that I didn't have before, which is always a good thing. I'm also going to leave a link to my full unedited attempt in the description of this video. All the bosses are also time-stamped, so if you're just interested in seeing a full kill of a specific boss, it's going to be very easy to find that. So, shout out to IronAraxxor. This was a very cool challenge, and I enjoyed the variety of PvMing with such a twist. Thank you to you and to the other donators for the generous prize, and hopefully I can participate in other challenges like this in the future. If you enjoyed my video and want to see more PvM content like this, leave me a like and a comment, and please subscribe, as I'm very close to my first YouTube goal of 500 subscribers. Thank you very much, and see you next time.